From a pint of Guinness in a nondescript Irish pub
to smoking a joint in a modern-day American Civil War zone.
This week, we're discussing Civil War, Irish Wish, and M.
This is The Film Angle.
Hello, Alex.
Hey, man. How you doing?
I'm okay. A little bit ill, hence how late this recording is. Getting out there to everybody listening. I'm still a little bit groggy, but enough to get through an episode. I can do this.
Yeah.
Yourself?
A little blocked up, not as bad as you, but clearly there's something going around. So we'll power on as best we can, and hopefully nobody will brand this episode the mucus angle.
Yeah, that's it. If I sound like I'm getting really bad, we'll press pause and I'll run away, clear the airways again, and get back to it. So we're trying to make the listening experience as good as possible.
Absolutely. Well, I hope that's put everyone in the mood. For some discussion around the latest cinematic treats that the film world has to offer us. Though one of which is the Civil War is the only one we actually saw in the cinema. But yeah, as mentioned, we are going to be discussing the new Alex Garland film, Civil War. We are going to be talking about the new Lindsay Logan film, Irish Wish.
Yeah.
That was a fun one to add in there. And then Fritz Lang's M as part of our BFI Sight and Sound Blindspot series. So do you want to get into Civil War, Chris?
Yeah, let's go straight into it, I think this is what everybody wants to hear us talk about, is about American politics and the landscape of it, from a British filmmaker too.
Yes. Alex Garland, who rose to fame as a writer on 28 Days Later, and then ended up kind of working in the film world, directing Ex Machina, which is very highly regarded, Annihilation, and Men. And was there another one? Or I think that might be. I think he did some TV after that. He did like Devs and stuff.
Yes,
like
that's right.
He?
Yeah.
But yeah, he's returned here for Civil War, which is set in this near future where America is at war with itself, and we follow a group of war journalists and war photographers as they kind of travel to Washington on what is essentially kind of the final battle to win the war, I guess.
Yeah. We follow. I appreciate that this film it deals with non-specifics of how we got to this point. There are clues. This is purely a hypothetical situation of something that certainly in the past 10 years doesn't seem that ridiculous as a possible outcome for America's future. I know this is just like one alternative universe version of how things could go, and it is heightened in a Hollywood sense, but it is an interesting sort of premise to begin with, and I really kind of appreciate that we're not giving context or a political leaning to begin with. Obviously, we're British watchers going to the cinema, and we're looking at this thing through a telescope. So it gave me that space to appreciate this as a film more than like a political stance, which would have been, I feel, a mistake if he went that way.
Yes, when we were kind of discussing this film prior to going to see it, I think one of my biggest fears was it was going to be, I don't know, almost preaching to a choir, essentially, and you know, this kind of like trying to make sense of American politics through a British man directing the film, all this kind of stuff. Like, I didn't know if it was going to be a little too finger waggy and everyone's bad and all this kind of stuff, and that made me worried. And do you know what? The fact that it does just drop you in there and doesn't give you much context, it's not so much interested about that did put me at ease a bit. Do I think maybe it's too devoid of politics? Maybe a little bit, but I appreciate that it was on this end of the scale rather than the other end, because I just think, you know, the kind of people who are going to see this film are probably going to be, you know, wokey lefties like myself.
I do think there's a big audience here that's going to be disappointed by what film that they get. I think if you know who Alex Garland is, and you know that this is A24 that's kind of producing this, you kind of know that this is going to be a little bit more than just like a Hollywood action film, as its title assumes it to be.
Mm.
But I do feel like some people are going to be disappointed that this is ultimately a film that, yes, has a political background to it, that is sort of contemporary and in the minds of everybody who's kind of alive at the moment. But it is a film about photojournalism, specifically in a war setting, and how that's something in these type of films that's kind of rare. And it felt, I got a unique perspective that I hadn't seen in these type of big budget films before.
Yeah, no, I agree. It was an interesting way to frame it. Yeah, like you said, I don't think we've, as far as I'm aware, apart from documentaries, and obviously we saw one recently with 20 Days in Mariupol.
Yes.
Specifically from the point of view of a war journalist, is something very we haven't seen, especially in the fiction world, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this kind of background of an American Civil War is mainly dress up, I would say, for what we see.
And it's a road trip movie, in a sense. We get Kirsten Dunst, who plays Lee, who is a quite well-revered war photographer in her field. We have a young up-and-coming photographer played by Keely Spinney. Anybody who watched Priscilla will remember her.
Mm-hmm.
He plays Jessie, who kind of forces her way into Lee's sort of her little group, her and her colleague Joel and Sammy, played by Stephen McKinley Henderson. He's a veteran journalist, and they kind of go on this road trip together, going through the landscape of America on their way to force their way to interview the president to kind of get the ultimate scoop.
Yeah.
And it becomes a character movie, actually, which is not really what I expected it to be. And I think I kind of got one of the best Kirsten Dunst performances I've ever seen. It's just something she's aged into this role very well. She always had a sort of strength to her as an actor, even going back to the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films. She always had this sort of like self-worth and self-strength. But here that sort of aged and manifested into something that's quite, leathery and a little bit more worn in a way that feels so authentic to this person who has lived a life as a really, seen some terrible things, as we get to see in the film through flashbacks of her in different countries, photographing horrific events. And I believed her in that sense, that I believe Daniel Day-Lewis to be, a fashion designer in Phantom Thread. I really believed that she was embodying this character.
Nice. Yeah. No, I think Kristen Dunst is really, really good in this film. And going back to your point about the road trip, I liked the commitment to this being an American road trip film, complete with kind of music cues and all that kind of stuff.
Really good music cues as well are like really non-conventional, like needle drops that just really work and juxtapose with every moment that they're placed in.
Yeah, apart from maybe that hip hop one in one of the first battles.
I like that too, but yeah, I know
that didn't work for me. Didn't work for me.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
that one feels out of place. The others kind of work for me, but I guess maybe again we're going through American genres of music in this kind of modern age as well. So I can kind of see where it's going. It just that one took me out for a minute, especially because following the war journalists and the photographers, I did find it difficult to know whether Alex Garland was celebrating them or, kind of almost criticizing them at times. I kind of struggled with his point of view.
Interesting. Yeah.
I think very early on, they are kind of portrayed almost a little bit like vultures, I would say. Explosion happens and lots of bodies lying around everywhere, and their first instinct is just to take photos of them, which I guess is the idea of like they've been doing this for so long. But I don't know, there's something about being an audience member and just feeling icky by that, of like you've just literally been involved in a kind of I think it's like a drone attack on civilians, and you were in the middle of that. And like I get it, but I don't know, like there was a lot of times during the film where I wasn't sure if I was supposed to be rooting for them or not. They seem to get in the way quite a lot, and they they're so unemotionally attached to everything that's going on, and until something happens to one of their own, and then it's like all of a sudden, they got to be sad. I found myself opposed to it at times.
Interesting.
I
Yeah.
did listen to a Q&A with Alex Garland, who said like he wanted to make a film where the journalists were the heroes. And I couldn't help but think to myself that I don't think he fully achieved them being the heroes in this film. But that's just my opinion. So,
Okay. Yeah. Usually not the best whenever a director explains their film. I kind of think of Aronofsky with his films, and it kind of lowers the messaging even more. I haven't listened to any Q&As. I was interested by your point there that you didn't sort of attach onto the characters, that they sort of lacked empathy. I kind of agree with you to a sense, but for me, this film was ultimately about empathy, especially with Kirsten Dunst's Lee character and her relationship with Jesse. At the start, you're so right. Like, these people do act like vultures from the outset. But we are sort of given context, especially to Lee, why she behaves that way. And that it's this sort of mechanism that she has achieved where she has to she does have empathy. We get signs of that all the way through, that it is just a part of herself that she keeps locked away in order to achieve that shot, in order to, as she puts it, send a message home to America not to do this. And that's the ultimate like umbrella message of this movie, is if it has a point at all, it says, regardless of what the politics are and who's who in this film, let's just not get to this point. Like, we can all agree that people stringing people up and hiding each other and, this sort of a partisan mentality across America is not a good thing for anybody. And, I kind of really bought into Lee's character breaking down throughout the film. I think that was, I thought that was achieved. And I actually got really attached to this small group of people throughout. And whenever those gut punching moments happen, when somebody, unfortunately dies or is lost along the way, it really did stick with me.
but when you see, non-named characters being shot, and then just kind of taking pictures of them dying.
Yeah, it's cold, yeah.
It's cold, but you don't feel sad about that. Or maybe you do, but like, I just felt like when they, when the inevitable happens and they lose one of the group, I was like, do you want me to feel sad now? I've seen what you do when other people die. You just take pictures, like. Mm-hmm. I struggled with some of that, because I also think like, I do think the film is about empathy and showing empathy, but what is the final message of the film? And we always do spoilers on here, so spoiler warning. As soon as Kirsten Dunst shows empathy, i.e. saving Kaylee Spenny's character, she dies. So don't show empathy.
Well, she does that at the start of the film too. She rescues her from the drone attack, which is almost a slip up in that character to begin with. I think we are given loads, and she does become this mentor character to Spaney unwillingly. I think we're given little trickles of information throughout, but I do think it just becomes overwhelming. I think once Dunst's character Lee realizes at the end that all of her efforts and all of her everything that she's sort of attached to her belt through the years, all this trauma that she's given herself, was actually for nothing in the end. That's when it kind of starts to hit home for me. But I get it. I don't think that the movie's perfect in portraying that, but I feel like Garland, for such a big movie, is subtle enough in those moments where you can kind of dig around and you just kind of feel it in your fiber when you're watching it a little bit. I did feel emotionally connected, but I can get why you weren't. I understand that.
I think I wish maybe the message wasn't so subtle, because the question of what's the point in this job, when like the idea is like it was to warn people of it not happening here, and now it's happening here. Like, I think that was a question that should have, I don't know, like, it felt like a one scene discussion, and then we moved on. And I didn't really see it so much at the end of as her kind of grasping with that. But I guess maybe you're right. But I don't know. The film just seems so in love with the action scenes, especially in that final kind of section with the attack on the White House, and it's so glorious and loud and explosive, and we're going in to kill the fascist president, and we're gonna machine gun the beast and all this kind of stuff. That I was so juxtaposed as to I felt like the film contradicted itself so much.
Ah,
Like, was it disgusted at these scenes, or was it kind of like getting a little bit more empowered? Because the film takes an apolitical stance throughout the whole thing, doesn't really go into the politics. The characters are somewhat apolitical, but then at the very end, it feels like you do kind of have a little bit of a there's an angle here, and obviously we don't get any context as to what's happening here, but I guess the basic idea is like this president is so bad that even Texas and California have combined to take him down, kind of thing. So
yeah, yeah,
you are supposed to be on a side, but I don't know. The film just contradicted itself in those moments, because the action is glorious. It's really well done. It's loud. It's flashy. I don't know what kind of budget A24 had, but it's probably not the same.
50 million, but it was
Yeah.
it is their biggest production thus far.
And it looks great. It looks great. There are elements of it which I was like, oh, it's Call of Duty the movie, with the weird kind of accessorized military uniforms we see at certain moments. But yeah, those kind of bits. I think maybe that final moment more than anything else, just kind of I don't know what you're trying to say. I don't know if I'm supposed to be cheering or if I'm supposed to be sad or if I'm supposed to be worried. The final action scenes lost me a little bit. And I like the film. Like, I don't get me wrong, I don't hate it. Even though it's probably sounding like I do right now. But I don't. I promise I don't hate it. In fact, I think it, like I said, all those bits where it looks good and it sounds great and like I said, acting performance is amazing. I'm just not sure if it kind of all comes together in kind of a way that I don't know if it didn't get me thinking. It didn't get me worried about the state of America or anything like that, even though we probably should be. But I just kind of was like, oh, okay. I'm not sure how to feel.
Okay, interesting. I guess we are sort of on different levels with how we received this film, because I just felt that the last action section of the film made an effort to be unglamorous. Actually, there are a couple of overhead shots of like showing Washington DC and some like anti-air artillery shooting in the air, and that's quite cinematic. But once it gets on the ground level and you're getting the shots from Spainy of the action unfolding, I think it stays quite cold and quite ultra realistic, I would say, and uses these photograph moments to kind of break up the action, to take away the glamour, where I think intensity was really at the primary of Garland's mind as a filmmaker throughout this experience. And that's kind of what stuck with me was the intensity of those moments. I think we should mention probably the most important scene in the movie. Well, not important, but the one that everybody kind of talks about, and it's when Jesse Plemons arrives. That scene is pretty. It's a hard watch in terms of just the intensity that Plemons has as an actor in that scene. That just seems like a really realistic scenario that could happen and doesn't seem over glamorized. It just pure simplicity of using the environment and popping the characters in a situation that we as an audience didn't expect. The use of sound is also really well manifested in this film. There are a lot of jump scares, which seems really inappropriate to say, but like there's a few of them. I was in the IMAX screening of this, and there were a couple of gunshots that really caught me by surprise. So they jumped out my seat.
The sound design of this film is excellent. Like, gunshots have never been louder. Like, it's and like Alex Garland nails, like you said, the intensity. Like you said, he nails it. That scene with Jesse Plemons is incredibly tense. You're on the edge of your seat. Like, I'm with that the whole way. That was my favorite scene.
Did it remind you a lot of it reminded me of 28 Days Later? Coincidentally, I know obviously Garland wrote 28 Days Later, but it reminded me of those sort of disaster what if scenario movies of the early 2000s. There's something a bit more like dirty, and it wasn't that obsessed with trying to give us like a whole panoramic 3-hour Hollywood spectacle. I wanted just to give us these hyper-focused characters and see how they get on in this hypothetical scenario. It really reminded me of that Danny Boyle series, but
it gave me a lot of zombie vibes. It gave me, like, the whole film feels like a zombie movie. I was quite surprised, actually, because not in a bad way at all. There was something about it that felt like 2012 zombie movie vibes. I don't know how to explain
I
this
think,
one, but like I was like, oh, this feels a little bit more old school than I was expecting in the way
yeah, I think
with
because
the road trip and stuff.
it puts a lot of emphasis on like the natural environment and
Yeah,
giving us time to kind of breathe in the landscapes. I think that's probably why, and we don't really get that a lot these days. And do you feel like you've went on a journey with these characters? And I think that's probably why.
yeah. No,
Yeah, I really like this film, Alex, a lot. I don't know how it will linger in the mind, how it will age in the years to come, because this is a very like contemporary, right here and now film. So yeah, see how it ages. I know a lot of people are angry about this film, and how could that reaction not exist whenever you're going to be making a film about a really fragile political landscape. So yeah, I think Garland did a really good job at navigating that and being very ballsy enough to kind of even objectively make a film like this. And I think he succeeds more than he trips up for me.
I think he trips up more than he succeeds. I think the film
That's
is
good.
quite contradictory with the images, and I think the setting is kind of more provocative than meaningful. I love the idea of a film about war photographers and war journalists. I think that's a really interesting point, and the question of like, what's the point in this when when we're now taking these pictures in America is one that's a really interesting theme that I don't think gets us explored enough. And it just makes me wonder if Alex Garland had maybe either set this in an actual either a past war setting or a current war setting, or looked in sort of if there were any kind of stories about real war journalists and war photographers that would make something interesting and meaningful on this kind of scale, and done that. I think that might have worked. I think the idea of just setting it in a modern day American Civil War just doesn't. I just don't feel like it earned the setting. You know what I mean? It felt
Yeah.
too provocative in a way, but not meaningful enough. So yeah, I felt very conflicted at the end as to like what am I supposed to feel? What am I supposed to think of these characters? And ultimately is the message like just like don't get involved, because it confused me the whole time. But but I take those points away. I look at the filmmaking in terms of kind of visuals and the sound and the tense nature of scenes, the pacing, the road trip, the music. Like that all worked for me. I like the film on those levels.
Uh-huh.
I feel like if I dig too deep, I start to dislike it a bit more. So
Okay, that's really interesting. Yeah, I think you're right though. I think this is a movie that unravels in a way. It's not perfect. I think it's got a few little screws to tighten up that would really make this a very interesting film to keep coming back to and revisiting. But it still makes me excited for Alex Garland films, even though maybe we might not be getting any more. Apparently, he said he's hanging his hat up a little bit as a director, which is kind of disappointing because I really do find him interesting. Every film that he makes solicits a reaction from me.
Yeah, the only one I haven't seen is Men. Have you seen Men?
Yeah, I saw Men actually in cinemas a couple of years. It was during the COVID pandemic, and I really enjoyed it. Actually, I thought that was again another piece of provocation that left you with a few questions at the end of it. I know a lot of people didn't get on with the film, but Jesse Buckley led horror vehicle. I'm up for that. But yeah, he does definitely. It's definitely a different flavor to this. No matter what movie he makes, it always looks really well staged, but he just makes something different every time, and I hope it's not the last time.
No. He's involved, obviously, mainly on a writing side, on the kind of 28 years later
A Cillian
trilogy,
Murphy,
which they're about to embark upon, aren't they?
yes.
They've already got directors set up for the first two of this trilogy, I think.
So Danny Boyle's coming back to do 28 years later.
And then
Cillian Murphy's in it, and they got Jodie Comer and Ralph Fiennes attached to this project too.
Oh
so,
wow, I didn't know that. And they've already got a director set up. They've signed up Nia DaCosta for the second one in this.
Interesting.
Trilogy,
Yeah.
apparently, so
Oh wow,
I
yeah, that makes
believe.
me really excited for that series.
I'm not a film journalist, so I read it somewhere.
Yeah. I think it's I think the wheels are definitely in motion for that movie now. That was always like I remember when 28 Weeks Later came out, and I was such a big fan of that as a teenager. And I was like, oh, when's I was always on like the online forums going, when's 28 Months Later coming out? And like that was announced, and then that failed, and then they're going to turn into a video game or whatever. So yeah, enough time has came on since 2002, and we can now look forward to that film. So yeah, I look forward to revisiting the Rage virus once again.
Yeah, it was only two, wasn't it? In the end, only, and one of them
28 days and weeks, yeah.
Yeah. Jeremy Renner was in one of them. I remember that much.
Yeah, that was the second one, and you had Robert Carlyle in that. I remember that
Yes.
different flavor that film had, but I remember really liking it as well. And it had a really good opening 10 minutes set in the house where Robert Carlyle runs to the river and escapes. That's a really cool opening for a horror film. But yeah, I might go back and watch that again. It's so good.
Yeah, no, I haven't watched those in so long, but they were like one of those kind of like sleepover films.
Yeah,
where,
100%.
Yeah, somebody would have the DVD, check it on. Yeah.
It's like you were in my house. Yeah. Yeah, so you were edgy. But yeah, that's it. I think regardless of where you fall on this film, I think it's worth seeing 100%.
Yes.
So
I think it elicits a reaction, and a discussion, which I think is interesting. And I was kind of I was very excited to have a kind of discussion with you today, Kris. Ever since I got to the cinema, I was just like, I want to know what Kris thinks, and I want to have discuss it, because it's kind of nice sometimes when, all right, a film might not 100% work for me, but it's always nicer when you have a lot to say about it, rather than when a film's just kind of like, that didn't really work and I don't really know what to say.
Which is quite common these days, I think.
Yeah. So, it's definitely interesting in that way. So, yeah, give it a watch.
Okay. This brings us on to our next film. We are going to discuss, Alex,
Irish Wish.
Oh, I've got my dancing shoes on now. I've got my I've got my leprechaun beard on. Yeah, no, this movie is what it says on the tin, guys. It's like it's a Hallmark movie, but happens to be on Netflix, and it happens to have Lindsay Lohan in the cast. We watched it when we were away together, Alex. And I actually had a lot of fun watching this with you. I like these type of movies. They're so low stake. I do not have to think. I can just enjoy the ludicrousness of everything going on. Did you have a similar experience? Was that shared?
Yes, it was. We're a few Guinnesses deep at this point.
I think we did have a Guinness or two.
We did. We set the mood. And Irish Wish, like you said, it is definitely a Hallmark film. I don't think you saw Lindsay Lohan's Christmas film.
No, but you said that was really good, right? You said it was top 10 of the year for you?
Not top 10 of the year, but I did quite like it in that similar fashion. And it is actually from the same director, Janine Damian. So I didn't know that going in, but I was like, oh, what else has this person done? Okay, yes, it makes sense that they've teamed up again with Netflix to make another Hallmark-style film. I think the Christmas one is more fun, and you should definitely watch it when December comes around, Kris. I think it'd be an interesting one for you to see.
Okay.
But yeah, it's interesting. Like, Netflix puts out films that don't have much flavor a lot of the time, and sometimes I feel like they wish they were a Hallmark film. But this is very much a Hallmark film. Like this
in every sense.
It's cheesy, it's tacky. It looks like they've got the costumes from a local costume store. It's all fancy dress.
It does. The costume department dropped the ball in this one. They really did.
And like you said, I don't think you said it on air, but you said something like Irish Wish is as Irish as I am.
Yeah.
It really is. Yeah. They definitely filmed it there.
They definitely did for some scenes, but like it's got that typical thing that a Hallmark film has where like the town, that there's always a town, and it's always so lovely wherever we shoot these things, and everybody's hello neighbor, and every shop window so like chocolate boxy and everything, and it's obviously like these towns are just like constructed from like plywood or whatever, but yeah, it feels like Ireland typed into ChatGPT. Like it feels, it's like, what if you mix like the Simpsons episode of Ireland mixed with AI, what would it come out with? And it's kind of this movie.
It's probably what the Americans think Ireland is.
Well, don't want to generalize, but in this case, it was made by Americans, so yeah,
it's like a fairy tale world. And I did watch a review of an Irish lady talking about the film and just how the geography of the whole film makes zero sense. But then again, it's not just that makes zero sense. A whole lot of it makes zero sense. Shall I discuss the plot?
This should take 10 seconds. Yeah.
So Lindsay Lohan plays Maddie. She is a book editor. And she's in love with the guy whose book she has pretty much ghost written for him, Paul Kennedy. And you got to say the full name for the whole film. He's never known as Paul. It's always Paul Kennedy.
It's Paul Kennedy.
Paul Kennedy. And she wishes she was with him, but really it's one of her friends who's going to end up marrying him. And they all go to Ireland for the wedding. And whilst, in the days prior to the wedding, she finds some weird Irish mythological wishing stone and wishes that, or kind of gets accidentally convinced into wishing that it was her getting married to Paul Kennedy instead. In which, she wakes up and she's married Paul Kennedy. But, everybody else is understanding of this fake history, whereas she doesn't have a clue, so she's slipping up all the time. But really, there's a message to this wish, and it's be careful what you wish for, because really, your true love is an English guy called James Thomas, who's there for the sheep shearing contest to take photos. And you're going to get wrapped up in some kind of crazy meet cute with him. And he's the guy you should fall in love with, because he's not taking advantage of you and your incredible writing.
Exactly, and they have a little bit of a, they don't get along to begin with, right?
Oh no,
there's a bit of fire here. There's a lot of there's a lot of sarcasm being thrown both ways, especially from Mr. Thomas. When he arrives first in town, he is looking forward to photographing the sheep shearing competition. Goes past a poster which says that it's been cancelled, and he just says to the camera, "Oh, I was really looking forward to that." So now he's got plenty of time on his hands to, just hang around in his sports car that he's rented from the 1990s. And
turns out the wedding needs a photographer, so he can get involved. But Paul Kennedy doesn't want to do any of the practice shoots or whatever, so gives Lindsay Lohan and him more time to get to know each other and get trapped in a section of Ireland, and they have to go drink a shit Guinness in a pub.
Yeah, they go drive to a cliff together and enjoy like rainbows and sunshine that Ireland is so well known for, and rains never. That's not Ireland at all. But they drive home and a tree falls on the road, so they have no option but to stay at the local fiddly-dee Irish inn and listen to fiddles being played all night and dance and play Guinness and teach Lindsay Lohan teach each other how to play darts, as Lindsay Lohan is like an expert now. She got a bullseye on her first go, and badly poured Guinness in the wrong pints glasses. There's so many little sins for every Irish person to enjoy in this film. But I mean,
I think you were quite offended at times, right?
No, I'm not offended. I think it's very I think it's very funny, actually. But you're right. This Paul Kennedy guy. So she is, even though this relationship between her and James is like developing throughout this whole story, she still 90% of the film is all in on Paul Kennedy from the get-go. And
it takes a ridiculous amount of time to come to that realization that we as the audience have.
And the audience are given nothing, even from the beginning of the movie, to understand why she likes him. He seems like such a fussy mama's boy sort of kind of guy. He just seems like nothing is interesting about him.
Yeah, he doesn't do anything overly villainous, apart from
which I thought is where they were
credit where credit's not due and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, they just kind of portray him as a bit of a pathetic wet wipe more than anything else, don't they?
Yeah, yeah, it is a bit like that. It's a bit like Heartbreak Kid, where it's like, oh, your wife at the minute or your spouse at the minute is okay, but you could have this better one. So yeah, it's just silly. Lindsay Lohan just gets to stand around and say stuff.
Yeah.
She's not really a character in this film. We've seen her from her early in her career. She can be good. Like I think she could still do a good rom com in her, if given the right material. But no, she's doing this. But if you're semi tipsy at like 9 p.m., 10 p.m., whatever p.m. at night, and you're with friends, stick us on. I mean, you're probably gonna find something to laugh at.
Yeah.
Usually not intentional.
Even if
Yeah.
it just means the lack of Irish people in a film called Irish. Even the guy who plays Paul Kennedy is Welsh.
He's Welsh. He's doing an Irish
guy.
accent. He's doing an Irish accent, which isn't good.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Yeah.
You can tell.
You can tell. What else is there to say about Irish Wish, Alex? It's kind of sometimes nice to look at. It's very vibrant, very colorful.
Very colorful, very colorful.
Yeah, and these type of films, like I think they're good for your mental health. Like I never feel annoyed. At the end of one of these films, I just feel like a little bit like, oh, that was silly. That was a good way to spend 90 minutes. But yeah. Don't watch this by yourself, though. Watch it with somebody.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it's very silly. It's crap, but
it's crap. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
I do like. Part of me feels, we obviously know that Lindsay Lohan's had a bit of a troubled past, but part of me feels sad that like, oh, this is what she does now. But then there's also an element of me that's like, well, do you know what? Anytime I see a new Lindsay Lohan Netflix film, I might give it a watch because we might have some fun. So,
It does prove that she has a lot of power and nostalgia for a lot of people, because this movie seemed to be performing for months really well on Netflix. Like, it was always in the top 10 for like a month or two. So, people obviously still want to see her on screen. Otherwise, this movie would have been lost.
Yeah, she's definitely got a following, hasn't she? I think there's so many... people like us kind of grew up watching Lindsay Lohan grow up.
100%. Yeah.
The ups and downs. So yeah, she's an interesting person, definitely.
Absolutely. And I said in one of our early episodes, our comfort films, Parent Trap is one of my favorite comfort films, and she's great. And as a kid in that film, so yeah, I'll watch any future silly Lindsay Lohan Hallmark film. I will watch the Christmas one.
You better watch that Christmas one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we've exhausted Irish Wish as much as we could.
Yes.
Alex, do you want to lead us on to our last film of the week?
Let's do it. So, for any new listeners, we are going through the BFI Sight and Sound greatest films of all time, the top 100, in which we have many a blind spot. And this week's blind spot that we are going to be discussing is Fritz Lang's, it's a 1930s film. I can't remember which year now.
31.
That's it. Very early. One of the first talkies, I believe. Definitely Fritz Lang's first talkie. M, which is number 37 on the list. So we're getting down, guys. We're getting it down. We previously spoke about Fritz Lang's kind of massive, his magnum opus, I would say, the silent film Metropolis.
Yeah.
Though that being said, it is, I don't know what you say, lower or higher on the list for
it's higher on the list. Yeah,
but not as. Which is bad.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you can. Yeah, that's a funny one. You can apply the right word at any time, can you? There, but, we both malfunctioned.
Yes, Metropolis is probably his most well-known one. I think
it's just so visually striking. Yeah.
But with M probably coming in at a close second. A film again that I'd kind of wanted to see for a long time, and just never got around to it. I'm always kind of. I feel like we've all seen the poster. It's quite striking, with the very kind of yellowy hand with a giant red M on it. So yeah, his first talkie. I mean, what do you think, Chris? It's about child murderers.
Yeah, actually, no. Throw ourselves straight in here. Like, you're so right. That poster is so iconic. I mean, as soon as you kind of regard yourself as a cinephile from a young age, you're just sort of aware of this poster all the time. You're like, oh, there's this film I'm definitely going to get around to seeing one day.
Mm.
And I know it's really, really important. I wasn't just so ready for how on board I would be so quickly with this film. It is like, for 1931, it does not feel its age at all. It doesn't feel like a first step into talking pictures. It feels like it's very well versed in what it's trying to do. It's very expertly put together and just kind of entertaining, even by modern standards. And I think there's a lot of elements that are in the modern day thriller that are rippled into this film and kind of, are echoed in today's films. And yeah, this film is about a serial killer who preys on children specifically. It opens up with a very chilling scene, almost kind of Stephen King-esque, in the way that we're thrusted upon. This guy's already committed murders in the last couple of years, and he's nameless and faceless to begin with. And we are hyper focused in on a group of children and one child specifically, and her mother, who is waiting for her to come home. And we are watching the latest sort of murder and disappearance, and we're watching it unfold, and it's this really intense opener, and it kind of goes from there. It turns into this film about a manhunt that this has gone on too long. The whole town are in this frenzy, along with the police and even the local crime syndicates are like, this guy is doing bad business for us. We can't. Nobody wants to go gambling. Everyone's on a curfew. Nobody wants to go out. This is damaging us. So police have their agenda to get rid of this guy, and so do the crime syndicates and everybody in the city. And it turns
And
into
I
this
think
frenzy.
the police keep looking into the crime syndicates because they have no leads to go off, so they're just going with like what they know. So it's almost like the status quo has been turned upside down, and yeah, it's not good for business. It's not good for business.
No. And we get some time, we're kind of teased with the killer. Peter Lorre plays the killer Hans Beckert, who is really intensely like magnetizing in this role. Like, he is really, really good, especially for 1931. I think he manages to give, in this perspective, a film that wouldn't have really been made at this sort of time, focusing in on this type of murder. Even decades to come afterwards, we weren't really seeing like child murderers as a plot point in the film. And to kind of achieve how three-dimensional this person is, it's not just like, I killed him and that's it. And that's, as the film goes along, certainly towards its climatic moments, we get a little bit more of a actually intellectual understanding of mental health around this person, and the panic within him as well, in a situation that this isn't just a cold killer. This is somebody who is impulsive and who cannot give in to his whims, and it becomes an interesting discussion on the death penalty, that sort of mob mentality. Should we condemn someone like this? Should we try to heal them, or should retribution be paid? And it's really profoundly mature for a film that came out in 31.
Yes, yeah. And I think it's really interesting as well. I don't know if you found this, but we've just gone kind of through the synopsis there a little bit. There's not really a main character. It is almost it's
an
like,
ensemble movie. Yeah,
it's this crime film that's kind of told just as like how the events play out, rather than kind of following. If this had been maybe an American noir film, you'd be following a detective on the hunt, or maybe you could turn that on its head and be fully with the killer. But you don't really even go to Hans Beckert's point of view until maybe like 40 minutes in or something like that, where you actually get to kind of see him try and kidnap yet another child to kill. But again, we don't stay with him throughout the whole thing after that. It is very much jumping around from his point of view and the police's point of view and the crime syndicate point of view, and then just kind of like random people on the street. I think the bit that the moments that kind of really kind of engaged me the most were just showing how society was changing due to this kind of killer on the loose, and everybody at this like really panicked, heightened sense, and where they're turning on each other essentially because they're so afraid of you're the murderer, no, you're the murderer. I saw you talking to a child earlier, and just
Yeah.
frenzy and panic on the streets. So really, really interesting.
And it doesn't seem to like be bogged down by its time period or country setting, being a German film or being from 1931. Its themes are so universal, and they never really age or turn. Like, we still have that mentality of people can act this way, and you're so right with the mob mentality. It's just, but there's a maturity too in the writing. Like, I think there's somebody says at some point, this will not bring our children back. Whenever um, they're confronted with the killer at the end, they've trapped him and they put him on this. The mob have put him in this setting with the local people, where they've done a forced trial on him, and the police are still on their tail, and they're deciding whether to kill him or not. But one of the mothers says, "This will not bring our children back to life," and that is really kind of a profound message. And I think that, I think if this was a Western film, I think if this film was made with Humphrey Bogart and it was made in the 40s or 50s in America, I think it would be a full revenge movie, and this character would have been a lot more colorful, and a lot more cartoonish than he is depicted here. I think he is ghoulish in his film. I think that's part of the performance, and it's
And
really
his giant eyes.
So unsettling, especially like that moment where he is marked with the titular M on his shoulder, and so that everybody knows in the local area that he is the killer. It's at the end of this plan where the local beggars have hunted him down, and they mark him for everybody to see. The panic he has on him, yet he still goes along with the plan. Like, he still takes the child and sees, he doesn't dump the child and run away. He only does that at the last moments where he feel like he can't get away. But his compulsions are so potent in this that it's quite horrifying to watch. The fact that people in our society even today still exist with these impulsions, and it still as an interesting question. Do you throw these people away to the side, discard them, or do we try to help them? It's a real confounding issue that will remain for centuries to come, and that's why this film just does not age. But I was just completely bowled over by how intensely entertaining this film was. Like, it was not a challenge to watch this at all.
No, not at all, not at all. And I think really interesting as well, I mentioned earlier, it was Fritz Lang's first talkie, his first film with, on-screen sound. And I think he uses it to a really great extent. The killer is found out through the use of sound. It's a whistling motif that we hear throughout the film. There isn't really any music that I remember. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but I don't think the film has a score, but sound does play a big part throughout, if I'm right.
There is a lot of like shouting in this film. Like, it is very melodramatic in terms of the emotions of, well, you're dealing with a topic that is it gets people very riled up. So it accounts for these conversations and group discussions where people are very animated and kind of biting with each other. So the film is very it has a lot of momentum on that basis, and the film builds and builds and builds as it goes along, and ends in this sort of like climatic scene where he is stuck in a warehouse hiding for his life, and all these parties that we've been following in the film are pouncing upon him, and he may or may not get away. We do still have that feeling watching that scene that this guy actually might get away with it, because they're feeling to find him, and it's quite intense to watch, actually.
And that reminded me again, the way he's caught out in that scene is through the use of sound again. It's him knocking as he's trying to pick a lock.
Yeah.
Clearly, it almost feels like, when a good director, when 3D came about or re-emerged in like 15 years ago, people would, like Scorsese would use it to the best extent they could. It almost feels like somebody really wrapping their head around a new use of the medium and how they could use it to enhance the film.
You're right.
But like you said, it doesn't age either. It doesn't feel like, oh, this is the first time I'm playing with sound. But if you think about it in that way, you're like, oh man, this guy's really making the most out of this new technology.
Yeah, you're so right about that. It just proves that Fritz Lang is so far in my eyes a genius. And we've only seen two of his films, but they're both remarkable for completely different reasons. Yeah, I need to watch The Big Heat. I need to watch Destiny, all those different films. So yeah,
Yeah.
because
Well,
he's
Big
obviously
Heat is a Humphrey Bogart detective film. It's a very
yeah,
good one as well.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it is very good. I think there's something as well to say about this. Obviously, we're a little while off World War II, but the Nazi Party were becoming more and more prominent, and Fritz Lang himself was a big.
I was thinking about this too. Yeah,
Yeah, he was very critical of them. Good, as many of us are.
yeah. He
And
eloped in the end, didn't he? Yeah,
yeah, and I think there's like this underlying kind of evil lurking presence in the film, like this idea that like there's a building of tension within Germany. I think it was post World War One, so we're kind of very poor. We're on the ropes. We're this idea that it was this kind of melting pot that this lid was about to explode. And I do wonder if there's something to that, or whether I'm reading into it, knowing what comes within the next 10 years. But I wonder if Fritz Lang had this idea of like, something's not quite right here, and society's gonna turn on its head at some point. But it was actually called Murder Among Us, or Murderers Among Us, and the Nazi Party investigated him, thinking that he was about to make a film about them, which is very telling, because it isn't about them in at least not in an obvious sense of the word. So yeah, very telling that they were like, "Whoa, what are you making here?"
yeah. And it's interesting because I think you're right. I think poverty is definitely like a subtext in this film. It's never explicitly talked about, but the way people come together in these groups that are sort of like hiding and ducking from the police definitely seems like a product of that depression of that era. And obviously, yeah, 1931, the Nazis were they were very much around and very much in power. So yeah, it definitely has that lurk in the background. But also, I was thinking about this film that we are in the Nazi Germany period, but watching it, you're still like, right, there's still so much normalcy to everybody living in this era, and the themes are very, very universal, like we talked about, and can be applied to every sort of societized, country. So yeah, so it just reminds you that we're in a period where horrible things were going to happen, but they can happen to normal people, and even people who worry about their children like we do and everything like that. And it just reminds us that we can't really get to that point. But I don't think that's the forefront of this movie. But it's just interesting because every film, I think, no matter when it's made in history, reflects the time period it's in, regardless if it's a silly film or a really profound film. There's a little bit of window dressing of what's going on in the background. It can't help but see itself into the frame.
Yeah, I just realized The Big Heat is not the Humphrey Bogart film.
Oh, okay,
that was what was that one called? That was the big. What was it? Not The Big Heat. What's the famous
is that
one?
you're talking about the one with Lauren Bacall? Because I think I've seen.
Yes.
The
Big Sleep. It was called The Big Sleep.
Yeah,
I got them mixed up. I have seen The Big Heat, and actually, The Big Heat is incredible. It's really, really good. Like 5 stars, incredible.
Okay.
So yeah, Fritz Lang is great. Big fan.
I did like The Big Sleep though. It was good.
Yeah, I did really like The Big Sleep as well. I don't know why I got those two mixed up. I guess The Big something. No, Big Sleep, different film. He hasn't made a film with Humphrey Bogart. He made The Big Heat, which is an American film, which is quite politically charged as well. It's excellent. You got to get onto it. It's really, really good.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's 2 films of his now that we that have appeared in the Sight and Sound greatest films of all time.
Fritz Lang has acted as well on the list as well.
Yes, in Contempt. So yeah, he's one of the main figures of this.
He's good in it too. Yeah,
he's really good. So yeah, big fan of Fritz Lang there.
Old Fritzy.
Good old Fritz. So yes, next week, the Sight and Sound blind spot is going to be another Charlie Chaplin film, City Lights, which I'm quite excited to see. I feel like silent films have been a very kind of
popular on our yeah, list so far.
Yeah.
We've championed them so far. So yeah,
Absolutely, especially because it's one of those kind of eras of cinema that I don't think either of us have like loads of knowledge about. So actually being forced into watching them, you
yeah,
go, oh, actually, maybe I should explore this era a bit more. It's a lot of fun. So yeah, really looking forward to another Charlie Chaplin next week.
100%. What else have we got on the ticket, Alex?
Yeah. So next week, and we promise we're not taking another break. We've been we've just been busy. All right, guys, we've been busy.
I'm not allowed to be ill again for like at least another 6 months.
I don't think your illness caused the break this time. I think it was scheduling. I can't fully remember, but yeah, we're going to try and be consistent in the coming weeks for you. Yeah, so we are diving into a bit of a horror double bill next week with Immaculate, the Sydney Sweeney nun movie, and Late Night with the Devil, which has been the kind of independent Dave Dismalchian. Is that how you pronounce his name, Dave Dismalchian?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, he's always been like a guy who, even if you don't know his name, you definitely seen him. He's always typecast as a very like snidey, sort of very slippery character in a lot of films, especially if you think about Villeneuve's films like Blade Runner and Dune. But this is his first time kind of out on his own as a leading man.
Yep.
And that's interesting enough just to see how that gets on. Because I think he's very talented.
Yeah, and the whole film is essentially like a late night talk show with some horror elements. And yeah, very much looking forward to getting into that with you next week, Chris.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, that has been the episode for this week. We look forward to seeing you again next week. Drop us a 5-star rating if you would like to. We'll always put Q&As on the underneath the episode on Spotify if you're listening on Spotify, but you can follow us and listen to us on other platforms as well. Follow us on Instagram, follow us on TikTok at The Film Angle. But yeah, that is the episode for this week. My name is Alex.
My name's Chris.
Goodbye and good night.
See you later. Bye.
Auf Wiedersehen.